Women's health needs innovation and creativity. It needs everybody to look at it in a new way.
There is a difference in the biology.
There is just this massive data gap when it comes to the female body.
It's not a women's health problem, it's a problem.
The immune responses are very, very different. In response to a pathogen threat, a male immune system will launch the Army. The female immune system will launch the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines.
This past June, WHAM hosted a celebration in D.C. for the 30th anniversary of the Revitalization Act of 1993.
30 years since women and people of color were finally included in NIH clinical trials.
I think it's time we do something. An anniversary should re-energize with a purpose.
3Not30. We don't want to have to wait 30 more years for many great things to happen.
Women's health research isn't just good science, it's a good investment.
We need to affect long-term change. We just can't invest blindly.
I'm going to be signing the presidential memorandum to establish the first ever White House initiative on women's health research.
Thank you, WHAM.
It's up to us, all women, to create the changes that we set forth today so that women and society flourish.
We can do this in 3 years. Let's not wait 30.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Carolee Lee, and I'm the founder and CEO of WHAM, Women's Health Access Matters, a nonprofit focused on the economic impact of accelerating funding for research and business investment in women's health. Welcome to our fourth dialogue in our 3Not30 Roundtable series that we're hosting this year to launch and share our objectives and strategy for achieving our 3Not30 goals. These dialogues include expertise, knowledge, and passion with a focus on changing the status quo of women's health. Let me offer a little background on 3Not30. This past June, WHAM convened leaders from across the ecosystem in recognition of the 30th anniversary of the NIH Revitalization Act of 1993, commemorating the landmark legislation that initiated the inclusion of women and minorities in clinical trials and research, but also emphasizing the ongoing imperative for progress in women's health. These preeminent thought leaders committed to driving significant, impactful, and sustainable change in the next 3 years, not waiting another 30, creating the imperative of change in 3Not30. Developed during our June event, this initiative focuses on 3 ambitious goals: double the budget, improve diversity and access to clinical trials, and mine the data. The goals outline actionable steps to accelerate women's health research, innovation, and investment. Today, we will focus on Alzheimer's disease and brain health in women, a critical topic for the health of all women, and hear the ambitious, actionable goals for the next 3 years from our experts. Our thought leaders will delve into the current landscape of prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and what the future looks like for accelerating better outcomes for women's brain health. Our experts will share in a critical dialogue in their 3Not30 goals and how we can support each other and amplify our work. With that said, I would now like to turn to WHAM's new president, Dr. Lori Frank, who was one of the original architects of the WHAM report on Alzheimer's disease, who will moderate this exceptional panel. And I thank our panelists so much for joining us today. Lori?
Thank you very much, Carolee. And I want to say how delighted I am to be here today with these leaders and innovators in brain health. Really looking forward to the discussion. So first, I wanted to share just the top line out of the WHAM report with a focus on brain health. So as Carolee mentioned, a team at the RAND Corporation completed some analyses in conjunction with WHAM about the downstream economic consequences of increasing investment in women's health research. And we started with Alzheimer's disease and AD-related disorders for a reason, because WHAM has been looking at brain health as one of the key pillars. And within brain health generally, we took a look at different criteria to decide what would make a good start for the WHAM report. We looked at prevalence of disease, disease burden societally. We looked at diseases that affect all people, men and women. And after reviewing those criteria, we settled in on AD and ADRD as that first report. And real quickly, I can just share that the initial finding that was surprising was when you look at women-focused research within the NIH portfolio for the years we were looking, in every disorder that we looked at, it was less than 15%. For Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, it was about 12%. But if you were to double that investment, that $280 million that represents that 12%, you would have a return on investment of over 220%. So that could return to the US economy significantly. So I just wanted to set that as the stage as we now turn to this amazing panel. And it's my extreme pleasure to invite each panelist in turn to describe their work and their connection to the field. So Dr. Brinton, I would like to start with you. If you could share some of your background from your truly pioneering research and share with us what has drawn you to this particular work.
Well, thank you, Lori and Carolee. I'm honored to contribute to the WHAM discussion with my esteemed colleagues. My research was transformed by one woman with Alzheimer's disease decades ago when I was a postdoctoral fellow. And it was the experience of interacting with her that led me to devote my career to understanding why women are at greater risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. And typically it was thought that it's because women live longer than men. And that's true. Women on average live 4.5 years longer than men. That doesn't explain the 20-year prodromal phase or preclinical phase of Alzheimer's disease. And what our research has shown is that it's not because women live longer than men. It's because women can start the disease earlier during this midlife menopausal transition that our research has shown can be that tipping point for vulnerability of developing Alzheimer's disease in later life. Our current research focuses a lot on the immune system, and we can discuss that later. I just wanted to mention that the research that we've done over decades now in women's health, funded through the National Institute on Aging, and also by the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation, what we've discovered is that we can actually translate our research into a strategy to sustain brain health in women during the menopausal transition and to reduce their risk, hopefully, of Alzheimer's disease. We developed a alternative to hormone therapy because women were concerned about breast health. So we developed a formulation that I'm very excited about. We have 2 NIA-funded clinical trials to determine the impact of phytoserm for plant-based selective estrogen receptor modulators on brain health, measures of brain health, and while protecting breast health. Lastly, we're also conducting a clinical trial in Alzheimer's patients to regenerate that Alzheimer's brain with the molecule allopregnenolone, ALLO for short. And what's very exciting also about this therapeutic development program is that it's based on a molecule that women generate in large quantities during the 3rd trimester of pregnancy. So Mother Nature has given us a molecule that promotes brain development that is safe in women of reproductive age with fetus. So it's undergone the most challenging safety test there is. And we're now in a phase 2 clinical trial with multiple sites across the nation. So we are very grateful for the focus now on women's brain health and the legions of women who are joining us in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just amazing work and truly pioneering. So thank you for that. All right, so next I'd like to turn to Dr. Phyllis Barkman-Farrell to hear a bit about what you're working on now, but I need to say that your own career has spanned from pharma to public-private partnerships and now with startup health. So please tell us about your current work, your current vision, and how you are working in that public-private partnership space.
Thanks, Lori, and thank you so much for having me. It's kind of amazing to sit on a panel with all these women that I've looked up to for so many years. So thank you. I'm very honored to be here. So my name is Phyllis Farrell, and I recently retired after a 3-decade career in pharmaceuticals at Eli Lilly and Company. That was really a tale of two halves. The first half was a commercial career where I worked on marketing and sales and change management, strategy, business development. But about 15 years ago, Lilly had tapped me to lead the Alzheimer's team. And I had the distinct privilege of leading our late stage development team working on semaglutide, solanezumab, lanabecestat, and then two diagnostics, Amyvid and Talvid. But as Robbie said, I had a person that changed my life as well and career. And 6 months after I started that job, my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And so I led a personal and professional battle through the end of my career. We lost my daddy in November of 2017. I wasn't fast enough for him, but I'll be damned if this disease doesn't get my kids and my friends' parents. And so from a career perspective, I became very passionate about all the things that needed to happen in our ecosystem around a therapeutic. So, Lilly had been 35 years in research, and finally we're making progress where some of at least the first, they aren't going to be the final, but they're the first therapies to cross over into regulatory approval. But the last mile is really, really difficult in this space. And we need to make sure that it's not just the therapeutic innovation, but it's all the other parts and pieces to make sure that the people who can benefit most from these new therapies do. And as part of my own personal experience, I watched how much of a toll caregiving took on my mom and my sister, who quit her job to take care of my dad and help my mom. And I think that story is all too common. And so I am super passionate, not just about women as patients, but women as caregivers, both the unpaid caregivers who, boy, if this continues, we're going to lose all of our progress in gender diversity in the workforce, but also paid caregivers who are angels on earth, if anybody has ever had one in your home. So right now I am retired, but about as unretired as it's possible to be, and am working independently to advise in public-private partnerships and venture investments to make sure that we're supporting entrepreneurs and innovation across the entire ecosystem that's going to support people with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, so now I would like to turn to Dr. Andrea Pfeiffer and hear about your vision in your role as CEO of AC Immune, but also your work as chair of the Global BHP Brain Trust.
Thank you, Laurie. And obviously, I'm extremely thankful to be here in this dialogue. And I really would like to thank Carolee and Mel for the invitation and their pioneering work. My motivation comes also from a very personal experience. My father had cancer, and I felt I need to really make a contribution to improve the patient's lives. So I spent many, many years at NCI, and I was really shaped by the mentorship of the pioneers in cancer research who pioneered actually 35 years ago where we are today, meaning precision medicine in cancer. So today at AC Immune, I'm trying to apply all this knowledge which I gained 35 years ago in oncology. And I'm really convinced that we are at a crossroad in neuroscience where precision medicine will make a huge difference in diseases like Alzheimer's. So precision medicine means that we focus on early detection. We have now finally tools available to identify people at risk We are, because of this tools we have available, we can think about targeted intervention. And obviously, we want to do that before disease symptoms occur, which really mirrors the early successes we have seen in oncology. And this is why at AC Immune, we always develop the therapeutic compound, the therapeutic solution, but also the diagnostic at the same time, because we really want to identify and intervene before the irreversible brain damage occurs, because we know once the brain cells are damaged, we cannot recuperate them. And when you take all of this together, the tools we have available to identify early people at risk, like we do in cardiovascular disease since many years, and we do need a medication, and which in fact can prevent the onset of this disease. Well, we felt that we can make a major contribution by developing a vaccine, which could have a very high societal and global impact and very much fit into the goals of WHAM. Now, we are not so far away. We hope by 2029, 2030, we will have such a vaccine, which means that we potentially can treat the disease, or I should say prevent the disease long before the disease develops, which means you can actually keep the brain intact. But that's the pharmacological side. But I'm also highly interested in the lifestyle changes and what we can do today in order to improve the Alzheimer disease development. How can we actually prevent dementia with the tools we have available today? And that's really why I'm passionate about my other function, which is the chair of a global BHP Brain Trust, where we are really looking into what are the possibilities by other means, such as food, exercises, music, to really improve the brain health, or if there are already dementia or onsets of dementia, then what can we do to actually improve the situation? So this BHP Brain Trust really underscores this by encouraging investment in policies that amplify research. We think, and we can speak about where we actually are in this research, but we think we need to amplify research and awareness in this area. We need to support research, we need to communicate about this, and we need to elevate the health, the economic, the social impact of women's brain health to gain priority as well as in meaningful investments. And in preparation of this dialogue, I couldn't believe how much the Global BHP Brain Trust goals are overlapping with what the WHAM's goals are. So in a way, you can say the Brain Trust really complements my AC Immune mission to pioneer precision medicine approach aimed at early detection and prevention of Alzheimer before clinical symptoms become manifest. And this is why we are really working on this vaccine. And if the vaccine will be working, which we know in a few years from now, then we believe that we can actually prevent potentially the disease of 400 million people. And this means also potentially 270 million women which are prone to get this disease. So altogether, I hope that we will have the possibility to prevent the disease by vaccine. At the same time, I think we need to look into other non-pharmacological means and how they complement each other. And last but not least, I would like to say it is important that we push research forward, that we invest in the understanding of brain health as such, brain health of women in particular, because they are the carriers and the exposed gender, and all of that together would mean a significant impact, significant savings to society.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. All right. So now I would like to turn to Ms. Merrill Comer. So Merrill, you have worked as a journalist and you have also been an author. You're a well-known and highly respected advocate for AD research. I'm interested in hearing from you what keeps you working and motivated in this particular area, and what your goals are in the near term to help advance change.
Well, thank you, Lori. First of all, I want to celebrate all of the exceptional women the audience has just heard from. I want to make the point that all these women were out in front of the battle before the topics like women, menopause, and Alzheimer's made the New York Times bestseller list, and post-pandemic push to drive. And the drive has really come led by Andrea to find a vaccine, because you have to manage global populations. As an advocate, I want to frame the urgency. It's personal, but it's also professional, because we need the energy of everyone involved. You know, currently there are 7 million people, Americans, living with the disease. Globally, 78 million by 2030 will have the disease. So we're talking 1 in 3 people personally touched. It is feared by those 65 plus, more than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined, and with good reason. Even today, unlike other diseases, we have no survivors. Now, I'm not a scientist nor a neurologist, but I spent 2 decades by the bedside caring for my physician researcher husband, who at 58 was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. At the time, the disease was steeped in stigma, so you pull a loved one away to protect their dignity. It was deemed a slow death sentence without a cure. We were 2 adults in our prime, careers upended, and no long-term care health insurance. So I know what I'm fighting about. 12 years out of those 24 years, I cared not only for my husband, but also my 85-year-old mother with dementia. She passed in her sleep 2 weeks shy of her 99th birthday in our home, as did my husband 6 months later and a week before the world shut down with the pandemic. So here I am. I'm a reporter, I'm an advocate, but what I also knew was that no matter what I did every day to take care of my husband and my mother, the disease was going to win. And that's why I say advocacy saved my life. And fast forward to today, we just heard everyone talking about brain health and prevention. They are midlife obsessions. And the WHO has 14 lifestyle guidelines to reduce your risk by up to 40%. We'll take them. The goal is to slow the disease progression with the treatments that are coming online. And I believe in brain health and will do everything to make sure that I stay healthy until the science catches up, because the timelines are longer. There is so much to do in our space. Today, those diagnosed with preclinical or mild cognitive impairment or MCI, they are feisty. They're not hiding away. They have their own Bill of Rights. They want to be treated with respect, not marginalized. They want PET scans covered by Medicare. And as Phyllis points out, the marketplace hasn't been ready for the future. So that's part of our job. And if you notice today, AARP invites those in their 40s to join, because brain health can't wait. And just this month in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article that read, the new, more hopeful face of Alzheimer's disease. Advances in detection and management have changed the way you view the diagnosis. Well, I'm not so sure about that. We can talk with Phyllis and the others. I still am on alert. But for those of us who believe in the power of information, I know my risk profile is high. I know that because it was on my mother's side, the maternal side, my risk profile has increased, and I devour the latest science. So our stretch goal is we want our brain span to match our lifespan. So I'm going to stop there.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So Carolee led us off by referencing the 3Not30 goals that WHAM has, which overlap with some of the goals we've already heard about here. In thinking about the 30th anniversary of the NIH Revitalization Act last June, Carolee had challenged a large group, what progress can we make quickly in 3 years instead of 30? And in line with that, you've all already mentioned earlier detection and communication, points I would love to hear more about, but I want to build on something you said, Meryl, about the role of personal experience and what's happening within the community of those who are touched directly by this particular disease of dementia. So interested in hearing your view and those of others on the value of bringing in that personal experience, what that means, both in terms of including the community in the work that you are all doing, as well as attending to the needs on the research workforce side. Meryl, please, or Andrea.
I'll defer to Andrea because I will say that once you have seen the disease up close and personal, I really think you're changed forever. And you can see how it's driven 3 of our panelists to act in the most positive way. Andrea?
Yeah, I think the personal experience really has a huge impact, and I'm sure without the experience I had in my family, I'm not sure if I would be as dedicated as I am. I experienced it not in Alzheimer, but in cancer. The experience is a similar one. You want to stop this terrible disease. And so I actually acted on 2 things. Number one, I really tried to understand why we were so unsuccessful in the research for Alzheimer. For 20 years, we didn't have any new drugs. But what was it? And I came to the conclusion that we really, really lack tools, diagnostic tools, to actually predict the risk. And I think if you ask me what is the major breakthrough we had, which really allowed that we have now the first drug already approved, the second one soon to be approved, I hope, is really that we could identify the individuals with this risk. And this allows us to go back 20 years. Speaking about looking at Mel and her life, which fascinated me. Actually, I think Meryl was the one who really encouraged me to work so hard with her book, which I read in one night, actually, is that we need to, yes, we want to treat, yes, we want to delay, but what we really want to achieve is to prevent. And this is, I think it's possible today because we have this possibility to identify people at risk. And I want to make a second point. When I started AC Immune, I had one particular second objective. I wanted to enhance the female leadership, the female scientific leadership, by really starting at the grassroots level and develop a cohort of women who can actually achieve and make this difference in this critical area of health. And I'm very proud to say that we have 57% women scientific staff, and purely based on merit. And I think to suggest women researching women's need in brain health would seem to have some allure and a huge impact. So I really want to make these 2 points. There are women and patients, but there are women and scientists. And these women, we want to capture and we want to motivate them so that many of them are fully dedicated to find this treatment and in particular the prevention of the disease. We want to have a prevention. We want not to see the disease.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And you also raised the topic of precision medicine. So could you please provide a definition of that and share how your work is contributing to a precision medicine objective?
Yeah, it's of course much more complicated when in cancer. In cancer, when I started and worked at NCI, here you identified the first mutations, and you knew which one will eventually lead to cancer. In our area, it's much more complicated because the only difference between a normal brain and an Alzheimer brain is actually that you have this protein, this sick or misfolded proteins. And these are proteins which you carry in your body, and nobody knows exactly why, in fact, these proteins become malignant. But the problem to take Alzheimer's as an example in our area is that we have not just one disease, we have multiple diseases, and each individual patient has a different composition of this misfolded protein. So in order to really identify the underlying pathology like we did in cancer so successfully. Remember, the first phase 2 trial of Herceptin was negative, and I was part of it because we didn't identify the women with who carried the HER2 gene. So it's the same thing here. So many clinical trials failed because we were not able to identify the people according to their disease. And this is where I think we have a huge opportunity here. We have the tools, we can say which is the underlying disease and treat the patient individually. And the consequence is, coming back to your objective, that we will have a better treatment, a more successful treatment, less safety signals, and much less cost because we only treat the people who can respond.
Excellent. So, Robbie, your work includes work on precision hormone therapy. So, interested in having you share some more about that with us and explain what precision means to you there.
Thank you. So we have, as I mentioned, we've been very focused on why women are at greater risk, and that risk can emerge during this menopausal transition. And that led us to a great deal, many years of research on estrogen action in the brain. And estrogen promotes the utilization of glucose as the primary fuel for brain metabolism. And the loss of estrogen induces this about 20 to 25% decline in glucose metabolism. You can prevent that reduction through the use of menopausal hormone therapy. That's the good news, right? There are different therapies that are more effective than others, and it's really, really focused on the progestin part of that, and the treatment regimen. And we can talk more about that, in detail. The principal reason why women elect not to receive hormone therapy is the fear of breast cancer. Right? And so they elect to vote for breast health over brain health. So for us, we really had to address that challenge, right? So that we could sustain brain health and protect breast health. And for that, we developed, and the other thing that we learned from women is that they were going to over-the-counter products because they were perceived as safe. And our research has shown that without testing for safety, you can't claim safety. And I'll leave it at that. We did publish this work. And so we are developing this plant-based selective estrogen receptor modulator formulation, PhytoSerm, as if it was a pharmaceutical, right? With all the rigor and all the safety and all of the clinical trials necessary to demonstrate that this is effective. And the goal here with PhytoSerm is to now provide that over the counter, because that's where women are going. So our research has over many years, and I have to say we came to this because I got very tired of saying to physicians, I don't know. You know, when they would ask me, well, what about all of these products that women are using, you know, my patients are using that they get over the counter? And I would say, well, I really don't know. And I would come back to the lab and say, we really have to do this, have to figure this out. And finally, one time I came back and I was very forceful, I know, fist on the bench. I'm sick and tired of saying, I don't know. And 20 plus years later, we now are in phase 2 clinical trials. Now, I will say that there are many women who experience hot flashes, some of them mild, others severe. And that hot flash is telling you, it's really communicating with you that the brain is changing. We think about the hot flash as, you know, this and a vasodilation, the dilation of the blood vessels. And what our research has shown is that there's a reason why you kind of dilate those blood vessels from the head to kind of the breast area. It's because the brain is hot. You experience heat, and that heat is being released because the brain is hot, right? And so again, just coming back to the brain is talking to you, right? The brain is sending out this SOS that this is not just an inconvenience. And for many women, it can be quite disruptive. So one of our clinical trials is really focused, both of our clinical trials are focused on hot flashes. One in particular is completely focused on hot flashes. And the other clinical trial that we're conducting with our colleague, Lisa Mosconi at Weill Cornell, is really asking, can phytoSERM promote and sustain the ability of the brain to utilize glucose as its primary fuel? So the take-home message is that menopausal hormone therapy given at the time of menopausal symptoms, not 5 years later, not 10 years later, not 20 years later. The brain has changed, right? You have to give it at the time that the brain is sending out that SOS.
Got it.
Laurie, can I ask a question?
Please, yeah.
Roberta, I'm a scientist. So do you actually know, or is it known, which receptor is involved or should be involved, should be stimulated in order to have a positive effect? And then I have a second question. I'm getting this question so often. I'm asked this question, should I take now this hormonal therapy or not? And there's total confusion. I mean, even of highly educated women, they come to them and say, well, you know, I think it's maybe good for something, but then bad for something else. So how do we need to improve in communication? I think there is a huge communication need, coming back to, for example, the WHAM, or what we are doing in our trust. What do we need to do to make your knowledge available to the women so that they can profit from it?
Yeah, to translate to clinical care. Yes.
And I think that's a critical point, and thank you for raising it. And I also think this is a perfect target for the 3Not30, right? We can do this and very effectively now, right? So let's come back to your first question about estrogen receptors. So in order for us, this is the kind of the 20 plus year journey, 2-decade plus journey to our clinical trials, because we understood that women were voting for breast health over brain health, right? And that in order to reach their brains, we had to address the breast health. And part of that was targeting a receptor called estrogen receptor beta. Because estrogen receptor beta inhibits breast cell proliferation. It inhibits breast cancer cell proliferation. It inhibits breast cancer cell migration. Now, this is research that was done in the cancer field that told us if you want to have breast health and brain health, targeting estrogen receptor beta is a smart strategy. And so we embarked upon a, decades of research, understanding, asking the question, if we target estrogen receptor beta in the brain, what are the outcomes? And the outcomes to date, right, is that every time we looked for an estrogenic response in brain and whether it was activated by estrogen receptor beta, we found that indeed it was. And in fact, it was from a mitochondrial kind of energy production perspective, it was superior to estrogen receptor alpha, which is, the proliferative estrogen receptor in breast tissue. So that's why we selected the molecules. We had this kind of therapeutic development pipeline that screened tens of thousands of natural molecules and ultimately arrived at a formulation of 3 molecules that target, plant-based molecules that target estrogen receptor beta. So so estrogen receptor beta is our target because it promotes estrogen action in the brain and inhibits estrogen action in the breast. The other component that you asked about is how can we communicate this? And I think that's a huge challenge. Now, all of our research, we're very fortunate to have the financial resources to publish in open access journals. And we do that very purposely because that enables both women and their healthcare providers to have access to this information. Now, is
Not
that
enough?
It's not enough. Right. Yeah. And actually, I'd like to bring Phyllis into this conversation about touching all of the sectors that need to hear this information that's being generated. So interested in your thoughts, Phyllis, on how to expand that messaging and what else needs to be done.
So thank you, Lori, for bringing, actually, sorry, Phyllis, but thank you, because that was going to be my question. How do we reach,
Well, of course, I'm a perimenopausal woman, so I'm like listening, right? I'm just going to text you, right? I think, let's think about 3Not30, okay? I'm really excited about what's in the pipeline, and I think we can invest more, and I think we can move the pipeline forward. But there are things that we can do today. And that's where my sense of urgency is, because this is a progressive neuropathological disease. And women in their mid-40s, early 50s, if you tell them they need to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, they're going to laugh at you, right? Because they're taking care of children, they're taking care of older parents, they're a double income family, they got their house. I don't get out of one of these conversations without saying, leave the dishes in the sink, go to bed, let your husband do them. Because we are not thinking about our brains until something goes wrong with them. And this is a disease that we know starts 10 to 20 years before symptoms. We can see the pathology in the brain. And so it's a midlife disease, but the symptoms come later. And I think there is so much that we can do in the female community. Look at what we do as women. If someone has an illness in our community, what do? We surround that family. This is what we do. Look at what women have done in the breast cancer space and really made this something that people are going to listen to. On the breast cancer side, I say to women, if you went into the doctor and you told the doctor you'd found a lump in your breast, and the doctor said, let's give it a year and see what happens, what would you do? You go find another doctor, right? But that's what we do with brain health today. If a woman walks into the doctor's office and says, I think there's something wrong with my memory today, not because they're bad doctors, but because they don't know about the innovation that's available today, they say, let's give it a year and see what happens. Well, I don't want a year of neuronal loss. So when I see a group like WHAM pulling these kinds of influential people together, I want a call to action. Every single woman on this call is sitting in, and there's some enlightened men, because I did check the participants, but they're sitting in a place of influence. And there's things we can do today. And that's around the advocacy for more research dollars. That's the advocacy around brain health. That's going into our doctor's offices and demanding that we take care of our mental health and our brain, just like we take care of all the rest of our body. And it's acting like Meryl. I'm here because Meryl said, Phyllis, don't let this happen to your career. What happened to my career? And she has said that time and time again and has challenged me to do it. So I think there's a lot of things we can do today. I'm excited about the research, but we need to open up our voices and stop baking casseroles and really take the mic and say, no, we're women of power and our brains matter. And so do the brains of our loved ones, but we need to take care of our own so that we can take care of them. Sorry,
Can
hit my,
yeah.
Build on for a moment.
Yeah.
I want to build on what Phyllis said, because to me, the power of WHAM, and before I get there, Ravi, please worry about women who are postmenopausal. I'm tired of doctors saying to me, we don't do research on women your age, so we need help further down. But the power of WHAM to me, and what drove me to Carol Lee's vision, was it moves across diseases. It breaks down silos across diseases that disproportionately impact women. So all of a sudden, the brain gets connected with the heart. We look at inflammation across the diseases. So it's a very different conversation. And it doesn't have the past baggage of woe is me. It is data-driven. And that was the brilliance of having Carol Lee as a businesswoman who understood that, to, say, enough, we have to change the conversation. So I really think that mining the data is another opportunity. Even as an advocate by the bedside, trust me, I knew we had to go earlier. And now the research has moved earlier. You just knew we had to get ahead. And even as early as 2009, when Us Against Alzheimer's, when we launched Women Against Alzheimer's as a network, we had a global challenge in partnership with Bright Focus, who also supports WHAM, to ask the question, does sex matter? Well, we had 600 project rooms in 65 countries to search out sex-based differences. So we need this search going on. We need to really incentivize the investment, but mining the data is the third in the 3Not30 goals that I think we really need to take advantage of now if we want the accelerant to satisfy everything that we've been talking about today.
Thank you, Meryl, for that. And as part of that third goal, we also talk about the WHAM Accountability Index. How can we identify who is doing this well? So my question, Phyllis, back to you, is about strategies for including sex and gender and other variables that are likely to be important as the research questions are being defined, as hypotheses are being set up, and as these founders are beginning to think about filling the huge unmet need here.
Well, as you mentioned, we just kicked off at Startup Health an Alzheimer's moonshot. Actually, Meryl sits on our board and represents the patient and caregiver for us. Thank goodness we have her. But one of the things that scorecard is looking at is equity. And specifically, we've had almost 100 companies apply for the first 20 spots. So if you don't think there's opportunity for innovation and people who are excited about innovation, we've got to figure out how to support more of those companies. But one of the ways we're making a selection on the companies is looking at diversity and whether the solution is both on a research side, collecting the data, but also from a launch side. Are they making sure that people will benefit from this? Because we know that social determinants of health impact brain health. And that's because brain health starts when you're very young. And if you don't have the access to diet and exercise and education, where the national averages are, and hopefully we increase that. We know women haven't. That those solutions also have to be able to handle, to be delivered in an equitable manner. And so choices are actually being made that way. And I believe the NIH grants decisions are made that way as well. Obviously, I have a commercial background. Money will drive it, right? Follow the money. But I think each and every one of us in the seats that we are in have a responsibility to just ask the question.
Right. So why haven't people historically been asking the question by sex and gender? What are some incentives to encourage that? Andrea, I'm interested in your view, and Ravi as well.
Yeah, actually, I don't know. I don't know why this question was not asked. And I don't know why not more research actually went into this. And as I mentioned in preparation of this dialogue, I really looked into the literature. What are the core hard facts? We heard of estrogen, and I think there is certainly, this is one dimension, but I think there is much more to it. And I'm really hoping that data mining, data science will help us on one hand. I really strongly believe in this, and that there are many databases out there which can answer some of this question. I also believe that the clinical trials now are looking at that point, and we will have more data to really look into it. I think, in my opinion, we are far from understanding this 70% disproportionate Alzheimer in women. I think there are multiple factors and we really need to understand it. But I want to come back to one important point, which I learned now over my 20 years of hardcore science, really, is communication. I'm so amazed when we are speaking to women, to patients, etc., how little there is known about lifestyle changes, what you can do. Phyllis mentioned sleep. There is food. There is exercises. There are so many aspects which are available today. Is it known? Is it communicated? No. So I think one of the aspects which I'm really taking as a second mission of my work is to enhance this communication. And I think all of us here in this round, we have a responsibility to communicate, make available, enhance the awareness of what we have today. We are not without means. There are means there. And this is a very important aspect. And I think if we can achieve that over the next 1 or 2 years, already we have achieved a lot.
Lori, can I just raise a flag? You know, when we talk about the research, the urgency is, the risk is here because without the data on sex and gender, the unintended biases that are being built into emerging technologies like AI that are only as accurate as what is fed into them, we're already operating at a disadvantage. So it's a it's a pivot. And that's why it's urgent. We don't have time to waste. And for those of us in the advocacy space, your instincts based on that opening video show that there is a moment in time. And if we don't seize that moment, it gets lost and dissolved and goes elsewhere, that energy. So again, I'm thrilled that everyone on this panel is committed to driving it forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we agree, there's a window here of opportunity, and you can see all of the energy that is around this. Phyllis, I'm interested in commercialization and communicating about market potential. So how do you go about that? And what can you share with us about your learnings about what is and isn't known about the true market potential for looking at sex and gender differences?
Well, I mean, women are controlling the purse in our community. But what's really interesting is, you said, why has this not been done? Well, animal models, Robbie will tell you, they're notoriously bad for the brain. And so this ability to understand the underlying biology is a challenge. Obviously, that's on the therapeutic side, but it's also on the diagnostic side. So the place that makes me anxious about gender differences and race differences and ethnicity differences is in the diagnostic journey. And the reason for that is we don't have capital markets that actually drive investments in biomarkers or in cognitive assessments. And that's one of the reasons why you saw Bill Gates and ADDF get together and create the Diagnostics Accelerator. They had to fix what was, a market gap. But, one of the things that we know about this disease, so there's a biology piece of this, estrogen, all those kinds of things, but there's also how does the disease manifest itself? And I'm going to goof this up because I'm not a neuropsych, but women have a different ability in our verbal acuity. And so you will actually see this disease look different cognitively in women than men. Now, for those of you that have been married for a long time, if I said to you that you did a better job with your emotion words than your husband did, that wouldn't surprise you probably. And if you have boys, you know that women do better with their emotion words, right? But these types of signals are what we're picking up on cognitive assessments. And so what it looks like is it looks like women stay better for longer, but then they kind of fall off a cliff faster. That's because those are the domains of cognition that are being measured early or late. And so I would love to see those types of questions be involved. I'd love to see more passive data collection, things that might not be quite as gender biased, although Meryl's right, it just goes into an AI model, so we need to test it. But I want to make sure we're not just looking at the biology, we're looking how the disease presents itself, and then of course, how our brain, whether we take care of our own brains while we're taking care of all those people around us that we take care of, if we've forgotten about our own. So I think it's got to be across the whole gamut. And the people that are going to encourage it are the women that walk into the doctor's office and ask the question. Because the United States of America, the incentive is not there for physicians to do it in a Medicare fee-for-service. But there's a lot of pretty strong women out there over the age of 65. And I think if they walk in their doctor's office and they demand that they want their brain health to be assessed, they'll succeed.
Okay, terrific. So we've heard a lot of themes today, and my thanks to the audience. The questions have been woven in that you've been sending to us have been woven into this discussion, but definitely hearing about that need to expand the evidence base around sex and gender and other variables, as well as communicate about what is known to all the parties who are making decisions in this particular area. So I do want to leave just a few minutes here at the end to turn it back to Carolee, who can share with us some closing comments, and I extend my thanks to the panelists, certainly. So Carolee.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you for leading and steering such a powerful dialogue. And thank you, of course, to all the exceptional leaders on this panel, because not only do you inspire me, I'm always humbled by the work and the ethics and the exceptional ability to communicate that you have. And we're just greatly appreciative of everything that you're doing for us in this space. And thank you to all of you, obviously, who are on this call for joining us today. 3Not30 is our call to action. You've heard it referred to, and collectively, we do hold the economic power to drive significant change. Women are at the forefront of the economy, making up more than 50% of the population and workforce, controlling over 60% of the personal wealth in the country, responsible for over 85% of consumer spending, and making 80% of the healthcare decisions. We drive economies, and we have the opportunity to shape a future where everyone thrives, not in 3 years, but in the next, not in 30 years, but in the next 3. WHAM is on a critical path to create collaborations and partnerships which help us execute in the most expeditious way possible. And so today we're very excited to share an announcement of one of WHAM's latest collaborations, sealed this year at JP Morgan's Health Conference in January, at a meeting, I think it was over breakfast, with Dr. Andrea Pfeiffer, one of today's distinguished panelists and chair of the Global BHP Brain Trust in Switzerland. Our shared mission will be to mobilize the scientific healthcare and institutional expertise, along with the data necessary to propel investments in women's brain health. As Phyllis said, follow the money. We agree with that. The WHAM Investment Collaborative hopefully will combine that expertise along with our research collaborative so we can achieve some of those goals. More to come as we plan WHAM's engagement with the Global BHP Brain Trust at the Lausanne Dialogues scheduled this October. We encourage you to visit WHAM's website at whamnow.org and join our 3Not30 initiative to be part of this transformative movement. We're putting a link in the chat now with the details on how to follow us and stay engaged in this critical conversation. And we all look forward to seeing you at our next dialogue in the series, which is on May 16th, which will focus on cancer and how we will accelerate changes in 3 years, not 30, to impact the lives of women. Please join us to leverage our collective power to create the change that we envision for a healthier, more equitable future for all. And thank you again for joining us today and for your commitment to WHAM.